What's up, YouTube? This is your girl, Megan. Welcome back to the Hood Astro Queen to all of my returning subscribers. However, if this is your first time joining me on today, be sure to hit that subscribe button because you know you want to. Also, if you are interested in booking your very own natal chart reading, feel free to contact me at astroworld, that's WERLD, at gmail.com, and we can go ahead and get you squared away on today. So, with that being said, today I'm coming to you guys once more with yet another reading, but this time it's going to be a historically based natal chart reading on none other than Josef Mengele. Now, for those of you all who are not familiar, Josef Mengele was a German Nazi doctor. Okay, he worked in one of the concentration camps, I believe Auschwitz, during World War II. And he is most notorious for performing deadly human experiments on prisoners, and particularly children. Children, he had this obsession with twins. He also mutilated the bodies of midgets, dwarfs, or even just like the disabled, the handicapped, mentally handicapped, physically handicapped. And these experiments, now that people are looking back over time, had no real life value. They were like, there was nothing beneficial to be gained, no knowledge to be quantified from these experiments, but they were just gruesome and sadistic and evil. And, it was just disgusting. It was disgusting. And he actually became one of the most hated Nazi figures post World War II. And his atrocities even earned him the nickname the Angel of Death. So we're talking about some very dark shit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read an excerpt, a bio excerpt from Wikipedia, and then we're going to go ahead and get started on his chart because there are a lot of interesting things to unpack. Okay? So Mengele was born on March 16th, 1911, to Walburga and Karl Mengele in Günzburg, Germany. He was the oldest of three children. His two younger brothers were Karl Jr. and Alois. Their father was the founder of Karl Mengele Sons and Company, producers of farm machinery. Joseph was successful at school and developed an interest in music, art, and skiing. He completed high school in 1930 and went on to study philosophy in Munich, where the headquarters of the Nazi Party were located. In 1931, Mengele joined the Stalin Bunderfrontstaten, a paramilitary organization that was absorbed into the Nazi Party in 1934. In 1935, Mengele earned a PhD in anthropology from the University of Munich. In 1937, he joined the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene in Frankfurt, where he worked for Dr. Ottmar Freyer von Wuschia, a German geneticist with a particular interest in researching twins, which will be very important during this reading, so keep that in mind. As von Wucher's assistant, Mengele focused on the genetic factors that resulted in a cleft lip palate or a cleft chin. His thesis on the subject earned him a cum laude doctorate in medicine from the University of Frankfurt in 1938. Now, both of his degrees were actually revoked by the issuing universities in the 1960s as the world discovered the horror they were used for, and nobody wanted to be associated with that, rightfully so. In a letter of recommendation, von Wuchers praised Mengele's reliability and his ability to verbally present complex material in a clear manner. Now, moving on to his role in Auschwitz, Germany. So, in 1942, Auschwitz, originally intended to house slave laborers, this is when they started moving all of the Jews from the ghettos into these camps, so to speak, began to be used as a combined labor camp and extermination camp. Prisoners were transported there by rail from all over German occupied Europe, arriving in daily convoys. By July 1942, SS doctors were conducting quote unquote selections where incoming Jews were segregated and those able to work were admitted into the camp while those deemed unfit for labor were immediately killed in the gas chambers. The arrivals that were selected to die, about three-quarters of the total, included almost all children, women with small children, pregnant women, and the elderly. and of those who appeared in a brief and superficial inspection by an SS doctor to not be completely fit and healthy. In 1943, encouraged by von Vischer, Mengele applied to transfer to the concentration camp. His application was accepted and he was posted to Auschwitz, where he was appointed SS Standort's chief medical examiner at Auschwitz to the position of chief physician of Zinger Familiar at Birkenau, a subcamp located on the main Auschwitz complex. The SS doctor did not administer treatment to the Auschwitz inmates, but supervised the activities of inmate doctors who had been forced to work in the camp medical service. As a part of his duties, Mengele made weekly visits to the hospital barracks and ordered any prisoners who had not recovered after 2 weeks in bed to be sent to the gas chamber. Mengele's work also involved carrying out selections, a task that he chose to perform even when he was not assigned to do so, in the hopes of finding subjects for his experiments, okay, with a particular interest in locating sets of twins. So here we go with that twin thing again. In contrast to most of the other SS doctors who viewed selections as one of their most stressful and unpleasant duties, he undertook the task with a flamboyant air, often smiling or whistling a tune. He was also one of the SS doctors responsible for supervising the administration of Zyklon B. It's like a pesticide that was used for mass killings of Birkenau gas chambers. So he helped create the chemicals that they would actually gas these people with in the chambers. He served in his capacity at the gas chambers located in crematory, I think this is 4 and 5. So yeah, so there's that. Now moving on to his human experimentation. So Mengele used Auschwitz as an opportunity to continue his anthropological studies and research into heredity, using inmates for human experimentation. His medical procedures showed no consideration for the health, safety, or physical or even emotional suffering of his victims. Mind you, all of these surgeries, all of these procedures were conducted with zero anesthesia. Mengele's research subjects were better fed and housed than the other prisoners, and temporarily, note the word temporarily, spared from execution in the gas chambers. The facility provided better food and living conditions than other areas of the camp, and even included a children's playground. Now, when visiting his young subjects, he introduced himself as Uncle Mengele and offered them sweets, while at the same time being personally responsible for the deaths of an unknown number of victims who he killed via lethal injection, shootings, beatings, and deadly experiments. This is children. These are babies. In his 1986 book, this nigga got a book? Oh no, this is someone else. Lifton describes Mengele as sadistic, lacking empathy, and extremely anti-Semitic, believing that the Jews should be eliminated entirely as an inferior and dangerous race. Rolf Mengele later claimed that his father had shown no remorse for his wartime activities. A former Auschwitz inmate doctor said he was capable of being so kind to the children, to have them become fond of him, to bring them sugar, to think of small details in their daily lives, and to do things we would genuinely admire. And then, next to that, the crematory smoke and these children, tomorrow or in half an hour, he's going to send them there. Well, that is where the anomaly lies. Twins were subjected to weekly experimentations and measurements of their physical attributes by Mengele or one of his assistants. The experiments he performed on twins included unnecessary amputation of limbs, intentionally infecting one twin with typhus or some other disease, and transfusing the blood of one twin into another. Many of the victims died while undergoing these procedures, and those who survived were sometimes killed and their bodies dissected once Mengele had no further use for them. So, yeah, and it just continues to go on and on about all of these cruel and evil experiments that he would conduct on these babies. And it was also noted that, unlike many of the other Nazi officers or SS officers who had to be under the influence of some sort while they were committing these acts of horror to other human beings, Mengele was sober, okay, in a very clear state of mind, making some of the most grotesque decisions. So now that that's out the way, let's go ahead and take a look at his birth chart. So, as stated before, Mengele was born on March 16th, 1911, in Gausenhausen, Bavaria, Germany, making him a Pisces sun. And also, that number 16 deals directly with sacrifice as well as catastrophe. So, that's something to keep in mind. Now, one of the first things that jumped out at me in regards to the layout of his chart is that his south node, he's a Scorpio south node, okay, with his nodes at the 12th degree. And that number 12 deals directly with victimization, perversion, and coldness. But particularly with him being a Scorpio south node, it definitely explains that level of cruelty, evil, the malicious intent. It could deal with him being very manipulative, him having very dark and twisted desires, there being a fascination with death, sex, and even torture, and even an obsessive compulsion, there being an abuse of power, him being almost addicted to doing these experiments, because a lot of Scorpio South nodes do have karmic a lot of karmic baggage surrounding very dark and intense experiences in life. A lot of these people are either victims in this lifetime themselves of sexual exploitation, abuse, assault, or they can go on to do these things to others. It can produce a very criminally minded person, or a person whose mind can be very dark, and the more unpleasant parts of life as described in the bio, such as deciding who dies, and dealing up close and personal with like death and suffering, and that kind of comes second nature to a lot of Scorpio South nodes. Obviously, every Scorpio South node isn't capable of the crimes that Josef Mengele committed, but there is a very strong soul tie with darker subjects, and things that can be very gruesome, and things that a lot of people would kind of have an aversion to. These people can be drawn to or have a curiosity about. Also, Scorpio is one of those signs that does lack empathy, okay? Because it's all about power. And this could be the way that you exert power over others, right? Taking some type of pleasure in that, or, as I stated before, abusing that in some type of way, which is just a complete understatement in Mengele's case. Now, something else that's very interesting is the fact that his Mars is at the first degree of Aquarius. That number one does deal with children, but it's squaring his nodes. So, in square to his south node, this could point towards him being a mad scientist, the complete dehumanization of people, especially those who were weak and vulnerable. This could also deal with that extreme sense of callousness, okay? Like I said, completely objectifying people. So he probably quite literally didn't even see these children as like breathing, living beings. He probably looked at them as like, I don't know, like little, like toys or something. This could also deal with him experimenting, okay? That Mars in Aquarius, experimenting and performing experiments that had no functional purpose other than to inflict pain or play out his need for power. This also points towards him being involved in a criminal enterprise, and can even point towards the surgical experimentation of children. Like I said, that experiment thing going on with that Mars and Aquarius there, okay? And one of the experiments that he did actually, which was inject children with bacteria, quite literally, can definitely encompass this aspect that Aquarius Mars squaring his Scorpio South node, because Scorpio deals directly with bacteria. It also deals with the injection, right? Injection of things. And that Mars element there is just about him like I said, being very experimental, conducting these mad scientist experiments. Like, okay, what would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? And, being very just matter of fact about it, making him very cold, emotionally cold. Now, his Jupiter, which is at the 14th degree of Scorpio, it's conjoined to his South Node, denotes a very strong and dogmatic and extreme conviction in his beliefs. And in this case, he was very much dedicated to his beliefs of eugenics and people, Jews being the lesser race, right? This could also point towards him wielding his medical powers over others in the name of quote unquote research. And Jupiter in Scorpio is all about research. It's about investigative research. Also, with the number 14 breaking down to five, which deals directly with like communication. It also does support this research based kind of experimentation because it does deal with like the dissemination of knowledge, maybe even him publishing articles, reading books about eugenics. That's definitely Jupiter in Scorpio, the study of eugenics. Also, he performed a lot of endurance testing, which coincides perfectly with this aspect that Jupiter conjoined to his Scorpio South Node, because it's all about longevity, endurance, and also it could deal with him performing these experiments where he would mutilate and castrate his patients, as Scorpio does deal directly with the genitals. He also had a fascination with the study and surgeries involving sex, sexuality, and the genitalia. He performed a lot of reassignment surgeries, so that's definitely in that vein of Scorpio. His Jupiter conjoined to his Scorpio South Node. Also, okay, this placement does deal with him taking up the study of physical anthropology and eugenics, as Scorpio also deals with DNA. And eugenics is technically the science of improving a human population by controlled breeding to increase the occurrence of desirable heritable characteristics. Developed largely by Francis Galton as a method of improving the race, it fell into disfavor after the perversion of its doctrines by the Nazis. So it's a type of science that isn't really uh, performed or conducted or studied today in modern times. But back in those times, these are the same types of science that they used to determine that black people were lesser as well. So, you know, there's that. But that's definitely indicative of that South Node configuration. Okay. His North Node, his Taurus North Node, is conjoined to his Saturn at the fourth degree, which dealt with him having some difficulty obtaining material security, as it was documented that he lived in financial ruins for the most of his life, especially after the World War II. He experienced lots of financial loss. This could also deal with him having very strict and uncompromising rigid values and even standards, which can even be tied back to his views on race. Okay, now his Mars, which is at the first degree of Aquarius, is conjoined to his Uranus at the 28th degree of Capricorn, which does reinforce a lot of those sadistic tendencies. It can make him a glutton for punishment, and it gave him with a lot of perverse sexual desires. This could also point towards his career in the military, particularly with his sun sextiling his Uranus, made him a well decorated officer. That Mars and Uranus could also point towards him having a fake name, which following the war, he did change his name to an alias in order to evade capture. Okay, because at that point, they were hunting down Nazis. And yeah, so he did take up a fake name. So that Mars in Aquarius can point towards an artificial name. So that's pretty interesting. Now his Mars is also squaring his Saturn, which is in Taurus. So dealing with him really tying a lot of his identity to these groups, being a part of like a government group or defining himself by these associations, which can deal with why he clung so closely and tightly to these ideals and beliefs, because they help give him a sense of purpose. The community and the brotherhood and associations that were granted to him by way of aligning himself with these groups probably fostered a very strong sense of community, especially with him being a Libra moon, socializing and being a part of the community, rubbing shoulders with others was very important to him. And once you add that with his deep seated proclivity towards just evil, it created the perfect storm. Now, his Venus is at the 20th degree of Aries, which can produce a person who does have difficulty tolerating those who are different than them. Okay. It also dealt with him treating people as extensions of himself, which the story sticks out in my mind. I read about a little boy who he took a liking to and started dressing like him. So he would dress the little boy up in a lab coat. He had to be 4 or 5, and he would give the boy candy, and he would walk around holding the little boy's hand throughout the camp. And one day he just kind of got tired of the little boy and sent his butt straight to the gas chamber. But it demonstrated this desire for him to have like a mini me. Like I said, somebody who literally was his reflection, an extension of oneself. It also produced an affinity for sharp instruments, that Venus in Aries. And it could also deal with him scapegoating other people, especially with his Venus squaring his Neptune. But then you can also look at his Libra moon, and then a lot of those Pisces placements that he has. His sun is at the 24th degree of Pisces. His Chiron is, I think, at the 3rd degree of Pisces. So he did have the tendency to scapegoat others. Now, taking it back to the sun, at the 24th degree of Pisces, conjoined to his Mercury, which is at the 19th degree of Pisces. This also dealt with him working in asylums, hospitals, and psych wards, him working or being assigned to an institution, okay? This also deals with him being a doctor, having a mind geared towards studies of medicine, biology, and chemistry, especially with that Mercury in Pisces. That could also produce the mind of a scientist, or a mind that has a very high aptitude for scientific studies. And with his Mercury trine his Neptune in Cancer, these interests that he had, these biological interests that he had, were used to kind of serve his country, or he kind of used them in a sense of like demonstrating his nationality or a form of patriotism. And this came with the whole idea of them feeling like that they were upholding the standards of the quote unquote Aryan race, right? Now, with his Sun and Mercury squaring his Pluto, which was at the 25th degree of Gemini, this gave him like a perverted sense of compassion, because typically you would look at a person who is a Pisces, Sun, or Mercury as being very compassionate people. But that affliction made by that Pluto in Gemini kind of blunted or compromised those morals, as it could produce a person who's very amoral, or who has a very flexible sense of morality, and these people could rationalize almost anything. So once again, when he was doing these things to these children, I highly doubt that, he was thinking with his emotions. He probably was doing it from the standpoint of like, oh, well, it's just research. These are just my subjects type of thing. Also, this could point towards the internalization of propaganda, like Hitler's Mein Kampf. Okay, people born during the Pluto Gemini generation held very strong opinions and like to express their opinions via media. So people writing a lot of books. Once again, Hitler is a great example of this, because I think he was born in the Pluto Gemini generation. So while he was in jail, he wrote his manifesto Mein Kampf, where he even like spelled out the whole concept of like the Aryan race and Jews didn't belong, and so on and so forth. But this generation of people had very strong opinions. to the point where it was like they wouldn't even mind oppressing or controlling others through their ideas, sacrificing others through their ideas. They also possessed the tendency to try to solve very complex issues with simple solutions. This generation did, which definitely coincides with this whole Holocaust phenomenon, right? Okay, the problem being, okay, there are people that we feel like are less than us, so let's just take a whole subset of the population and kill them. Like, so oversimplified. So oversimplified is ridiculous. But his Mercury squaring Pluto, his Pluto and Gemini, definitely pointed towards him kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and holding very extreme ideals and beliefs. This aspect also demonstrates an abuse of power, especially as it pertains to the disabled. You know, with that Piscean influence, can deal with the handicap, but it can also, you can also even look at that as him killing people, like gassing people, because Pisces also deals with gas. So there's that. Also, that Pluto and Gemini, especially squaring his Sun and Mercury, does point towards that obsession with twins. Him feeling like he had to do a lot of research. That's that Pluto element. Research and investigation, uh, like with twins and the DNA of twins, quite literally. Once again, Pluto dealing with DNA and Gemini dealing with twins. You know, why do certain twins come out this way while others come out that way? Trying to really get into the genetics of what made them the way that they are and studying their DNA. All of that is very much Pluto and Gemini. Also, according to one of the survivors, an experiment that he conducted on a set of twins was fusing their bodies together. He would actually take these children and stitch their, like, sew their bodies together, which is very Pluto and Gemini, because that Pluto element, even that Scorpio South Node, deals with fusion, okay? Fusing things together, fusing people together. So that's very interesting. And it also does deal with surgical procedures, you know, inserting sharp instruments or objects, extracting things from people. Like, so, you know, all of that is very much Pluto and Gemini, but also can speak to that Jupiter conjoined to his Scorpio South Node. Very sadistic man, very sick man. And as it pertains to his escape, okay, which is very conducive with him being a Pisces Sun and Mercury, because that quite literally does deal with escaping, fleeing, but it could also deal with like holding people hostage, which, you know, no wonder he worked in a concentration camp. But particularly, his Sun and Mercury are trining his Neptune in Cancer, which can point towards his family actually helping him or aiding him in his disappearance, which a lot of historians talk about. You know, after the war was over and all of the SS officers fled, he actually used his family to cover for him, you know, while he went and like changed his identity and started a brand new life somewhere else. His Chiron is at the third degree of Pisces, which can deal with him um, or his death, the nature of his death, so to speak, because they say that he actually died in a pool by way of a stroke. But, you know, with this Chiron and Pisces, in addition to his Sun and Moon or Sun and Mercury placements, he could have died from drowning as opposed to like the actual stroke itself, especially with his Sun squaring his Pluto, his Pisces Sun squaring his Pluto. It was probably a death by drowning. But it just also reinforces this theme of victimization that and pain that he inflicted onto others. Okay, so yeah, that pretty much yeah, that's pretty much my video. Y'all drop down in the comment section. Let me know what do you guys think. Like, what did you think of this era? Have you ever heard of Josef Mengele, this monster, the angel of death, as people call him? And you know, what are your thoughts on what he did? And yeah, y'all just be easy out here, man. Practice unconditional self love so that you can love others. And until the next video, I holla.